to this congregation, Lord, that's what they would receive. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jermaine.
So if you were in my vacation Bible school, you know that I use this phone for a lot of my notes. So when Danny asked me if I would co-lead with him for the church sermon, I was a little nervous, because the groups are bigger, but I've gotten a lot better. So the topic was redemption. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, our church being in the place that it's in. It's located in the middle of the city, and coming from this neighborhood, as a growing up, I saw a lot of things. Like, I felt like, I was fighting an eternal war. Like I said, I grew up in this neighborhood. I can tell you every street, as Bethany can tell you. When we had to pass out the flyers for VBS, I would tell her where all the streets were. I fought for my life in these streets. I ran these streets day and night. I've seen a lot. I've experienced a lot of heartbreak. I've seen a lot of my friends pass away from being shot or, lifetimes in prison. The streets will suck you in if you don't, if you let them. I come from a place of misled identity where both my parents weren't present. It was just my mom. So that meant that I had a lot of responsibility early, like maybe 10 years old or so. I was watching my brothers and we were just hanging out always together because my mom had to work a lot. So there was really no time for me to be a kid. All the men in my family were pursuing what they thought was right, and I followed behind them because I didn't know there was another way until my mom met this guy named Kurt, and he told her I should come to his school. So the church and the school, when I started attending those things, that's kind of when my life took on a new change. It meant more to me. And I could see that I had a lot of people praying for me. I had a lot of people loving on me. And I had a lot of people showing me that just because I lived here doesn't mean I had to be from here, like be of here. So when I thought about my life in this neighborhood, what it means to me, I thought about the parable of the sower and how each person here, each elder person here at some point dropped some seeds off somewhere in the neighborhood, whether you prayed for someone or you took someone out for dinner or you just called and said hello, you planted a seed, and some of those seeds didn't grow, but some of those seeds did. So I would say that I'm a product of one of those seeds, of those seeds being grown. Me, Danny, a lot of us are products of those seeds. So your seeding, whatever it's called, wasn't done in vain. Just because you don't see it right away doesn't mean that it didn't work for you. So like I said, there was people who stepped in my life that really impacted my life. There was Kurt Hoover, there was Pete, there was Lou Zachman. They lived in our neighborhood. They mentored us through Boys Brigade, and they took us places, and they everything was always followed with some kind of Christian correction. It was okay, I'm gonna talk to you about this, but then I'm gonna throw some Jesus on it at the end so that it sticks with you. So even if it didn't seem like it stuck then, now in my late 20s, I can see it, and they can see it growing within me. So for all of you, all of you elders, and the ones like me, Danny, Rita, Ryan, we're the next in line, so, and we started planting our seeds too, in our youth group and whatever the extra activities that we do. So you guys get to see your seeds planted through us, and we get to see our seeds planted through the youth group. And like this, so this is our neighborhood, you know. So it's like a war, you know. Like every time when we come to church on Sunday and we're worshiping like crazy, and I'm pretty sure that people out here can hear the music playing, and they're like, "What are those weirdos doing in there?" We're battling, you know. Like we're fighting against the evil that's on the outside. So like I said, when I think about redemption for me, it's like I think about all the kids who are in this neighborhood, the same exact neighborhood that I came from, and the same and even if we don't, like, some of us don't live here, but we come here to serve. So this is our neighborhood. And the church, the school, this is our neighborhood. So if we reach out to people more, like we pray for people more, we go up and speak to people a lot more and don't be afraid, then I'm pretty sure those people will start to come in. I don't think it was a coincidence that Vacation Bible School, like each day, the amount of people grew. Each day there was more people and more people and more people. It wasn't like we were even really giving out anything. Like we were giving out pretzels and water. But they were lining up to come, you know, so that must have been some great pretzels and water. I didn't really have any of it, but
Something in the water.
something in the water, exactly. So this is what I've learned from from my years of being a Christian, that some people hide behind what Christ says and use it to their advantage instead of standing beside it and use it to fight back. Which one are we? From what I could tell, we're the ones who are fighting back. You know, we're the ones who are trying to get people into our church, into our worship, trying to plug people everywhere. You know, we're really out on the front lines fighting each day. There was a situation that happened like last week maybe. There was some friends who were having an argument, and I decided to step in and be the peacemaker. And the one friend looked at me and said, "What are you going to do? Don't you hang out with those passive Mennonites?" So I think that was his way of insulting me, but to me that was a moment that let me know that I am where I'm supposed to be. You know? Like the fact that he even recognized that I hang out with the Mennonites, you know. And so to me that was a win for me, that he understood my position. He understood that I hang out with the passive Mennonites. But little did he do that a couple of weeks ago when we had that incident in the church and Chauncey wasn't so passive that day. And Gwen and Todd weren't really passive. Todd prayed for the guy all the way out to the middle of the street. So yeah, prove that guy. So pretty much what I wanted to say is that we are the light of this neighborhood. And I feel like when Mr. George came a couple weeks ago and he was talking about the revival, I really feel like that's what we are. And I feel like we're also in our harvest time, you know, like from years and years of the elders praying, you know, like we're finally starting to see some seeds grow. And I think that we really need to be praying hard, you know. Just because we're seeing results now, like that doesn't mean stop, you know. That means to pray even harder. And we need to start reaching out to people more, because I really feel like that the church is going to be flooded with new people like soon, and I feel like we have to be ready. So, are we ready?
Still on?
Can I come up and have the mic?
Yeah, help yourself. This one's good to go. Chauncey's got it set up here. tough act to follow, Jermaine, Jenny. So I'm glad that you're going to be in between us two here.
Praise God. Praise God, everyone. Praise God. I'm the one that came from outside. In fact, I came the whole way from Canada down here. But I love the Lord. And that's why we're here. And this Chauncey and Gwen were here. He's my son, and he used to be up there too. But I said, wherever we are, we're missionaries. And so, I don't know who it was. I'm glad you asked. I get forgetting names. But the young man that spoke, Jermaine, he was teaching Bible school, the adults. And I was in that class. And he was scared, but he did a terrific job. And so I went back and told him and his wife, put my arm around you. I said, you have that giftings. We were talking about giftings today. And the word of wisdom that the Lord gave me and knowledge was, he's going to be speaking more. And look at this today. Hallelujah.
Yeah. Amen. Jermaine, keep some mission. It's your bad self. Yeah, so when speaking of fear, when this whole idea came about of the outdoor service, you know, this is kind of like this, we're calling this like the summer of whatever or something, right? Leadership. Summer of new things. Because Todd, and for those who don't know, our normal pastors were on sabbatical this summer after like, I don't know, they've like 70 years or something they've been serving. It's something crazy. So I'm on the leadership team, and fellow leadership team members. We've been figuring out, all right, what are we doing this summer? And one of the things that I have a heart for is being outside, getting outside of our walls. I love our church. I love our, worship in the sanctuary and kind of a tight-knit group that we have. But it's also like, what are we doing this for if we're not reaching out farther than the walls of our church? So that's why we're out here this morning. But Todd and Marita, bless that. They do it. Do whatever. We don't care. We're going to be out of the country. Where are they at? Alaska. Anyway. So with that, with my passion and desire of like, I want to do an outdoor meeting came, well, who's leading the outdoor meeting? Somebody's got to do it, right? So speaking of fear, I didn't want to be up here, but, I have a lot of fear with public speaking, unless you're my youth group, and then I just talk all day. But, just like Jermaine, we have to step into that fear. We have to step into the unknown, the uncomfortable. That's where God wants us to be. I heard a preacher once say that, like, if you're comfortable in ministry, if you're comfortable with your Christianity, you're not doing it right. You should be uncomfortable. You should be stepping into new areas. So anyway, so I asked Jermaine to help speak, and we wanted to touch on redemption, because I feel like that's a really important theme for Baltimore City. If you just walk around this neighborhood, you'll see, houses, physical redemption that we hope would happen. That people would be arriving in houses, and then we see lives that are just touched by brokenness and addiction and all these other aspects that we're praying into redemption for their lives, right? So it's like, that's a good enough theme to be talking about when we're out in the community. So then I got to thinking, okay, how can I connect to redemption? What do I know about redemption? And it turns out I've had a lot of redemption in my life, apparently. So for those who don't know, I'm fairly newly married as of May 6th, made a year, so about 14 months of marriage with my wife. She's beautiful. And one thing that we both knew that we needed before we got married was we wanted to get a lot of premarital counseling. Not that we were like, our relationship was like falling apart or anything, but we knew that we're very different. We come from very different backgrounds, have very different opinions on almost everything. So we're like, let's get as much counseling as we can. So we had 3 different sets of marriage counselors. The Holy Trinity, right? 3's a good number. We weren't going to go to 7. We were like, we'll take 3. 7's too much. So we had one of the premarital counselors that we had was from Maria's church. Her pastor, Roy and Marin, a husband and wife team that pastored down there. And we really feel like with the 3 premarital counselor kind of couples that we were seeing, it really touched all the aspects that we wanted to touch for counseling. So we had Kent and Beth Hess, who are members of our church here. They did pre-marriage counseling with us, and it was very much just like practical. Like, you might run into trouble because you expect to go to bed at different times, and you don't know that until you get married, and then you're in trouble because you didn't go to bed at the same time. So very practical. Like, these are things to look out for in your marriage. And then we had Todd and Marita, who are the pastors of our church here, and they really did some spiritual premarital counseling with us of, like, you know, Danny, how do you receive, like, God, and how do you express that? And Maria, how do you, and just kind of helping us understand how we connect spiritually in different ways. And then Roy and Maren took a very academic approach. So they wanted to kind of explore roots that we come from, generational kind of strongholds that might be popping up in my life and her life, and how they would come into play. And so that's where when we went through that process, I saw how much redemption's happened in my life. So when we met with Roy and Maren, we kind of traced my ancestry back as, you know, as far as I knew, day-to-day life of what my aunts and uncles and grandparents and stuff were. And I know my ancestry back to like the 1700s, but I don't know what those people were like. And so some things were pointed out in that. Some things were highlighted, like generational strongholds that are in my life. And some of the things that came out was like, you know, addiction. Addiction is really strong in my family. There's a lot of alcohol addiction, there's a lot of drug addiction, there's a lot of gambling addiction. So addiction's a stronghold. Broken families is a generational stronghold in my family. There's a lot of broken families and divorces and single parents and stuff like that. You know, sexual abuse is like a generational stronghold in my family. Just like, you know, who knew? How does this affect me? But you know, it can affect you. And the list goes on. There was like a bunch of stuff that came up. Am I forgetting anything important, honey? Poverty. Yes. Poverty is a generational stronghold in my family. So when I traced my ancestral roots back, I got all the way back to like the 1700s. And from what I could tell, from basically the early 1800s on, we've been kind of poor. You know, that's a long generational stronghold of poverty, right? My family. Alexia, come join us. All the way back to the 1800s, my family has lived within a 20-mile radius of where I'm standing. You know, back in the 1800s, my family lived in Locust Point before it was Locust Point, before it was like cool to live there. It's like that's where blue-collar boat workers live. So yeah, poverty is a generational stronghold of my family. And so then that all really stuck with me really hard, because for the past probably year or two, I've really been seeing a lot of chains break. That's kind of been a theme of my life. Is like chains are breaking, not only with me, but with my ministry, with people, with the youth of my ministry. You know, there's some of you guys know Isaiah. He lives in one of these houses right over here. He has a lot of the same generational strongholds that I have, and I've seen him slowly start breaking those things and wanting new things out of life. And so that's inspiring for me. And so meeting with Rory Martin and kind of pulling those things out kind of helped clarify and organize in my mind, like, there's so many areas in my life that should have caused me to fail. There's so many areas in my life that should have caused me to be just like everybody else in my family. You know, my family, I'm the only practicing Christian in my family. There's several people in my family who say they're Christian. I'm the only one who's actually practicing in any real way, who's actually seeking God, who's seeking fellowship with other Christians, who's trying to live, you know, a good life. You know, I'm one of the only people I think the only person in my family that owns a house. You know, which is crazy to think. My grandmother had 8 kids. You know, I have like almost 30 cousins. I'm one of the only people in the entire group that owns a house. You know, so it really helped me kind of see specific areas where chains have been broken. So then I thought back, and Maria actually challenged me with this after we got married at some point. You know, she just said, how did you turn out the way you turned out? Like, what happened? You know, when you see so much crazy, and Jermaine can connect to this, and Rena and Richard can connect to this. Like, we all come from families where there's just generational brokenness, right? And so it's like, how did you turn out like this? I mean, Rena you could ask Rena the same question, like, how did you turn out like this? And so it really got me thinking then. Thankfully, Roy Martin already kind of pointed out some strongholds for my family. So then I started thinking, what happened? What did happen? And God is what happened. God is what happened. There's no other way. There's no other way to connect where I am now without God being the centerpiece of the redemption that's happened for me. And so I think back, I was 12 years old. My friend Sierra Monroe, Linda knows where I'm going with this. My friend Sierra, she introduced me to this guy. His name was Joey. She told Joey that my name was Donnie. So Joey walked up and said, or I think he asked my mom when mom worked at the store, "Can Donnie and Chucky come play?" And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." You need to leave. So I met this family's, the Johnsons. You guys know Linda and Joey and Jason and Tony. You guys see them here. And so I started going to Joey's house to spend the night for sleepovers. And part of that was Linda made very clear, if you spend the night here on Saturday night, Sunday morning, you're going to church. I don't care if you like it or not. And it was a lot easier to get me to get up and go to church than even for other boys, because they slept like rocks and fought, tooth and nail. Me, I was like, I'm going to do whatever, I don't care. So I started coming to church, this church here, Wilkins Avenue. I started going to Boys Brigade, which was led by Kurt Hoover, who ironically, the year before that, was my 5th grade teacher at public school. We had no Christian connection whatsoever, but he was my teacher for an entire year. The next year I started coming to Boys Brigade, and he's like, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here? I live here." So I started going to Boys Brigade with Kurt and Lou and Pete, the same people that Jermaine spoke of. And I started going to youth group, right? I started connecting into this group of people that were weird, so weird, but really, loved me. There were people that loved me, and Kurt, I always say Kurt is the first person that made me realize that it's okay to be, it's cool to be Christian. You can be a Christian and still be like normal people. Not like, Joyce Myers on TV, which is what I saw from Linda's house. And then I started, a couple years later, I started going to Mount Clair. Kurt texted me, I was out of school, and Kurt was like, "Hey, we're starting high school up. We want you to be in the first class." I think I was in first class. Richard might have been in one of the first classes. I started going to the school, and then I had more people investing in me. And so, God's what happened. God put all these people and all these organizations and all these different groups whose sole purpose was to just reach out to kids like me. That's what Boys Brigade existed to do. Reach out to kids like us. The school existed. The original parameter of the school was you had to live within 6 blocks of the school or something. The whole point was to reach out to us, and it worked. God knew what he was doing. He worked it out. And so then I started thinking even more specifically of okay, well, so what did God do for these specific areas of brokenness, of generational kind of strongholds in my life? How did he redeem those things? And it's worth mentioning, I went to all these things. I went to Boys Brigade Youth Group, Wilkins Avenue. I was on a men's retreat up at Rocky Gap State Park. Thank you, Chauncey. Joey, sorry about your phone. It's still in the lake. Rocky Gap State Park. I dropped Joey's phone in the lake. I was 17. Kurt was like, "Do you want to go on a men's retreat?" I was like, "I'm not a man." He doesn't know I'm 17. But I went, and that was super impactful for me. I did all those things, and I still left. That's the point. I still left. I was going to Boys Brigade Youth Group. I was a whatever rank I was in Boys Brigade, helping junior lieutenant, or I don't know what they did. I was helping in all these different areas, and I left. I just straight up left. It was it's this physical relationship that I have, or it's church, and I left. And I left for several years. But all those seeds were planted, and they couldn't be taken away. You couldn't unplant the seeds, right? God knew what he was doing. Kurt planted the seeds. Lou, Pete, Alita, I was part of the first writing class that Alita ever led in this school. She had no idea what she was doing. I was in it because I thought a lot of girls would sign up for it. A lot of girls didn't sign up for it. It was one girl, and me and Jermaine and Richard, and it was why are we here? But Alita planted those seeds, and Christine Hoover planted those seeds, and Glenn Hoover, who used to take me every other Wednesday, me and Joey would go hang out with him and just do whatever. He planted those seeds, and so I left the church. I did what I wanted to do for years. Those generational strongholds had their grip on me. I was doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing, and eventually I came back. Eventually, times got tough. Eventually, God sent 2 blizzards and Chauncey and Gwen. We had 2 blizzards, and I was trapped at Jen's house. They came over, was like, come over for dinner. For a completely non-planned out reason. Not because we're trying to trick you into starting a care group with us. Not that at all. Anyway. So years later, I came back, I dipped my toe back in. I was like, all right, I'll go to this dinner, I'll start this group, sure. And little did I know that was 2010, that 2 years later, my life would completely change in ways that I never thought. And my marriage falling apart and all the turmoil that came with that. Anyway, so I think, I was trying to think about, okay, what are specific areas? What did God redeem in my life? Well, here's what he redeemed. I'm not an addict. I'm not addicted to anything. I don't do drugs. I'm not addicted to alcohol. I'm not addicted to gambling. There's no addiction stronghold in my life. And that's God's redemption for me. That's God redeeming a generational stronghold. What else did God redeem? I had no father figure growing up. Not poor me. This is something everybody in this neighborhood is dealing with. I didn't have a dad growing up. How did God redeem that? God redeemed that with... Are you raising your hand to answer? God redeemed that with Kurt and Pete and Lou and Glenn and Chauncey and all these men who I didn't have any idea were coming, but God knew was coming, and God was preparing them. He put them in my life. And he's like, you don't have one dad, you have a holy father, and I'm going to give you an abundance of earthly fathers. And I can't tell you where I'd be without Chauncey in my life. I can't tell you where I'd be without Kurt and Pete and Lou all pouring into my life. Chauncey, in my 20s, Chauncey taught me so many lessons in the past couple years that I should have learned in my teenage years that nobody taught me. He taught me how to deal with money. He taught me how to be a responsible employee and a responsible father and a responsible friend. So God redeemed that. God redeemed me not having a father. And an interesting little side story here. So just a couple months ago, I went on a men's retreat with Kurt Hoover up at, where are you going to summer camp? I forgot the name of the camp. New Life, I think. New Life Bible Camp. So he invited me to this thing. Jermaine was supposed to come. He bailed. Hang your head low. You should feel ashamed. So it was just me, and Kurt was coming, but I showed up first. And the age range wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Let's just say that. I was the third youngest person at the retreat at the ripe old age of 30. I was the third youngest person there. So there were a lot of wiser men. A lot of wiser men there. And so Kurt showed up, and Kurt he'd known all these people from even before he went to Wilkins Avenue. He knew him from his old church, and he had old mentors there. And at some point over the weekend, I realized, and I told Maria this, I called her at some point during the weekend, and I was like, you know what? It amazes me how good God is at planning. God orchestrated all of this. And what I realized over that weekend was I never thought about who invested in Kurt's life. Kurt was just a guy that invested in me, right? It's just like our parents. We don't think of our parents as young. Michaela doesn't know me anything but dad. She doesn't think of me as a teenager or a kid, but I had that life. And I didn't think of Kurt before Kurt was Mr. Hoover. Well, at this retreat, there was this whole group of people that Kurt was in Bible study with 20 plus years ago. And his mentor, basically the person that my Chauncey, was there. And his mentor was talking to Kurt about do you remember that Bible study that one specific study that we had about this subject? And Kurt was 20, and he's like, yeah, I remember that. That really impacted me. And it's just dawned on me this is so much bigger than me. We're so self-centered and so egocentric that we're only focused on us and what we're directly impacted with. But it was this person, this 70-something-year-old man now, poured into Kurt. And so many other people poured into Kurt because that's what God told them to do. And then Kurt poured into me and Jermaine and Joey and all the guys that were in youth group and all the people at the school. Kurt Hoover was the visionary for this school. We've had hundreds of kids go through this school now. And just to think that God orchestrated all that. Anyway, nice little side story. So God redeemed the addiction stronghold of my life. God redeemed the broken family in my life. You know, we have a happy family unit now. You know, I have a good wife and a good daughter, and I think we have a good family unit that's like centered on God. So God's redeemed that stronghold. You know, poverty's been in my family forever. Like Marie and I were talking about the housing crash of like 2008 or 9 or whatever it was, and she was kind of talking about how her family was affected by that. And I was like, that affected us in no way. No way. Like, we've been in a recession since I was born. Nothing changed. Like, there was a recession, so what? We didn't lose any money, we didn't lose any house. Like, we were poor anyway, right? Jermaine, did the 2008 housing crash affect you? No. Because we were poor, right? But God's redeemed that. Now, I'm not wealthy by any means. I'm wealthy in love, and I'm wealthy in friends, and I'm wealthy in family, and I'm wealthy in having a great daughter. But I'm not wealthy financially, but God has taken care of me financially. I have, you know, we don't have crazy outstanding debt. We have a house note. Everybody has that, unless you're some people. We'll talk about that later.
Wow.
We don't have an immense amount of debt. We have enough money to cover what we need. And then just recently, you know, I was in a job for 8 years. I was at the same company, and I was making okay money. I was making enough money to support the family. I had a little bit to put in savings. And, you know, I was complaining one day at care group. If you're not in a care group, get in a care group. It's a place you can complain. I was complaining in care group about my job. There's been a lot of struggles, and it's just been heaping more and more on me at my job. You know, I came in to do one job, and then somebody got sick, and it's like, here's 2 more, and then people got fired, and it's like, here's 3 more jobs, and, you know, I was doing everything. And so I was complaining, and Jason Burkholder, who's, you know, one of my closest friends, and Keith Pfeiffer, they both just encouraged me. They're like, you know, put your resume out there. What can happen? And I was like, they're not just gonna hire me. I don't know how to do anything real. I just know how to work at this place. And they were like, put your resume out. And who did I go to? Chauncey. I went to Chauncey and I was like, I need to update my resume. And I sent him the resume. And then he sent me where my real resume should be, not what I sent him. I was like, here's the real one. I got rid of your old one. And I put it out there. And within a month, I had not 1, but 2 job offers. So praise God. Like, I had 2 job offers. And Maria and I, when we talked about this, we were like, we'll basically take what I'm making now. I don't even need a raise. I just want to go somewhere else where there's room to grow. Like, that's what I was asking for. You know, when I'm like, God, I want something else. I just want something else that I'm making the same amount of money. We had 2 job offers, both with increases, and one with like a 30-some% increase in what I was making, which is way beyond what I thought I would ever make. Jermaine and I always talk about this. We both, at some point in our life, I never thought I'd make more than $10 an hour. I literally had a thought when I was working a warehouse job, but why would anybody ever pay me more than $10 an hour? I'm not worth $10 an hour. Nobody's ever going to pay me that. I'm making more than $10 an hour. So God has broken that stronghold of poverty. And he's only broken it, you know, my family's always like, you know, we need to go to the church. They give you this, or they do this for you. You know, when I was down and out, when I was in college and wrecked my car, you know, there were people in this church that were like, here, let us help you with that. You know, we're going to look out for you. But that's only because I'm investing in this church. It's not because, like, they're not just finding me, seeking me out in the world somewhere and saying, let's help you. They're saying, we see that you're doing good. We see that you're following what God's doing. We see that you're listening to him. So let's help, right? Let's do that. And so God has broken another generational stronghold for me. And all these things he's broken only because I've been faithful for it. Right? Like, he wouldn't have broken all these things when I left the church. Great things weren't happening in my life when I left the church. I didn't leave the church and suddenly become like a millionaire who had like all the best friends in the world and father figures and no addictions and no issues with anything. That's not what's happening when I left the church. When I came back to the church, that's when strongholds started being cut off. That's when things really started happening for me. And so that's what Jermaine and I have hoped for in our ministry. You know, when I'm thinking about what am I doing youth group for, I'm doing it because I've seen God work in my life. I've seen what God can do with these kids because he did it with me directly. I don't have to have third-party stories I don't have to find some YouTube video about what God's done for people. He did it for me. So when I'm talking to Isaiah and I'm talking to Justice, or I'm talking to whoever, I can say this is what God did for me and this is what He can do for you. So I have faith for redemption because it's happened in my life. So that's what keeps us going, right? And then it's just so beautiful to see so many people, so many kids, so many youth come into our group, and just God allowing us to pour into these people. One of the greatest connections I've seen this past year is Justice and Jermaine. I love that Justice and Jermaine are mentoring together. What an odd couple, right? Like, they're nothing alike. They're nothing alike, but they're connected. And when that happened at the winter retreat, when they started hanging out and talking, I was like, this is amazing. I'm so happy for this, right? So that's what we hope for our youth group. That's what we hope for our church. We want redemption in our church, in our youth group, and that's what we hope for the city. I haven't lost faith that redemption can happen in the city. If I had, I would be going somewhere else. But Maria and I are talking about, we want to get Michaela into different social groups. Well, the church doesn't offer that as much as we'd love to. But this is where we need to be. This is where God wants us to be. So we're not needing it. So we have faith for redemption. We're asking you guys have faith for redemption. And we're hoping that we have more outdoor meetings and our numbers grow because it's not 187 degrees out here. But that's it. I've taken up plenty of time. So let's pray real quick. Thanks you guys for being faithful and coming out. Rita asked if we could, for those of you that are able, when we're done, if you guys could just take chairs and put them either at the front of the door or take them into the basement where they are stacked up. We gotta break this stuff down. If you're not able, everybody can't do that, that's fine. We still have a ton of donuts. You get donuts and water and anything that you want from the back table, okay? So let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you. I thank you for the testimony that you've given me. I thank you for the chains and stronghold that you've broken in my life. I thank you for redemption for me, even when I didn't deserve it, even when I wasn't making the greatest decisions, Lord, that you had faith in me, that you saw redemption in my life. And so I just pray that the redemption that you've given me, the redemption that Jermaine's experienced in life, and the redemption that so many of us have experienced, Lord, that it would just be multiplied. That we would see seeds growing, we would see redemption in our youth ministry, we'd see redemption in our care groups where there needs to be redemption, we see redemption in our city, God. We just pray that you would give us increased faith and increased fortitude, increased strength and stamina for the fight that we're all in, for the battle that we're all in, Lord, that we would just be praying harder, as Jermaine said, that we'd be praying harder for the seeds that are planted, that you'd be harvesting them. And we just thank you for everyone that's faithful in our church, everyone that's here today, and everyone that couldn't be here today, Lord, that you have brought them here for a reason, that we are all part of this mission, and that you're going to take this mission and do with it what you will, Lord. So we have faith for that. So we just thank you for everything that you give us, for the gifts that we have every day, Lord. And we just pray these things in your name.